And hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of VCTV with your host, Kyle Ellicott. We are here to speak about impact and social responsibility. A lot has happened in 2021. We're going to summarize a little bit of that for you and also get our awesome panelists' take on what's to come in 2022. But before we get started, big thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in, and also to the Token team and to Hasmic for making today's episode possible. Let's go ahead and introduce our guest. Keith, welcome back. A short little introduction for everybody.
Hey, thanks, Kyle. Great to be here. This topic on impact investing and social responsibility, near and dear to my heart. I spent more than 20 years in impact investment, mostly in clean tech and venture capital, before forming UpperStage Capital in the last year. We've moved a little bit to a blue ocean. We've seen in impact investing in combining ESG into a lower middle market buyout strategy. So we're acquiring companies that make impact that are in between the venture capital group and middle market mainstream private equity. Takes a hands-on approach, but by looking for impact in these companies and applying an ESG framework to understand risks and opportunities for improvement, we are able to identify great opportunities and to grow them up really quickly.
Wonderful. And Fabio, welcome back as well. Just a little introduction and background for everybody, please.
Yes, Kyle, I'm an economist by training. I have a PhD in economics from the University of Chicago. I've been working in many places during my career. I started at the International Monetary Fund. Then I moved to the European Central Bank for the launch of the euro. Then I made the jump into the private sector, and I worked for Goldman Sachs as an economist in London, in the global research group. I moved to the Arabian Gulf to work for sovereign institutions in Qatar, in Dubai, and in Oman, where I was the chief strategist officer of the Oman Investment Fund, which is the sovereign wealth fund of the Sultanate. Now I'm a partner in a boutique investment bank in New York called Golden Eagle. And at present, I'm setting up an impact investment fund called Mindful Impact. Probably will be based in Luxembourg. And just to be specific, in Europe, impact investment has very distinct characteristics, which I will explain in a few minutes.
All right. Well, Fabio, I'm going to throw you back on the spotlight. Explain it a little bit more to us.
Yes, impact investment in the European Union has been defined by a taxonomy issued on March 21 by the European Commission. In particular, there is the Article 9 of this sort of directive, which explains that impact investment is different from ESG because an impact investment fund must set performance fees based on two criteria: the financial return, like any other fund, but also the achievement of predefined impact targets. For example, if you are a fund manager, you get paid, you get the performance fees if your investment yields, let's say, in excess of 10%, but also if, for example, you manage to reduce carbon emission by a preset number of CO2 tons. So this is an interesting concept which forces the financial institution, first of all, to find those investments which are more likely to yield, to have consequences for the well-being of people, for the environment, for corporate governance, and in general for the Millennium Goals of the UN. You have to have, by the way, an external auditor that will validate the achievement of those targets, and those targets have to be measurable. So this is the, I would say, characteristics, the innovation in impact investment in the European Union, which maybe most people might not be aware of.
Thank you very much, Fabio. Keith, I want to come to you about this past year, 2021. You've been doing everything and anything between UpperStage Capital. You've been looking at impact for some time, even ESG as a bigger bucket. You've been looking at this area for a few years. I won't date either of us in that statement, but talk to us about what's happened this year. Give us a summary of what's changed from January 1 to here we are at the almost end of the year in December 2021.
Yeah, well, for the last few years, we've been seeing impact investing go from being a kind of code word for philanthropic investing, just putting money to work to feel good and not worrying about return, to it becoming more and more mainstream, right? As Fabio talked about, you need to see the financial performance as well as measurable impact in the world. In previous shows, I've talked about the need to tie impact to commercial performance. Unless you're actually selling something and it's going out into the world, it's not really making an impact. There's a difference between potential and actual measurable, quantifiable impact. That trend has continued this year. I would say the big change is that layered on top of that, and sometimes confused with it, is the huge rise in ESG investment. The interest from both the LP community in terms of institutional investors, strategics, governments, etc., but also investment managers such as UpperStage, looking at that as a useful tool. I think the confusion comes about because both impact and ESG are concerned with environment, that's the E part, and social impact, the S part. Governance is the G part here. But I think the easiest way to think about the difference between those two things is that the impact is your company's impact on the world. ESG is the world's impact on your company. It's a way to assess risks and opportunities. They are compatible, they are complementary, but they're different things. And the last year, we've seen attention given to ESG investing rise enormously to the point where we have actually said, well, this is a big part of our assessment of things. We should actually adopt this as a core part of our practice. We already do these things anyway, and the world is caring more and more about these issues. Actually applying it into an existing company, as we're doing right now with Talius, a clean tech building materials company that we acquired in October. This is proving to be an interesting educational process. Established companies, whether they pay attention to ESG or not, they didn't think about it that way. And we think it's opening up all kinds of new opportunities both for investors and for companies to improve their performance.
So let's dive into that. What are some of those new opportunities that you're seeing?
Sure. Examples we would see on the social side, for example, we're all used to seeing companies, really established companies that are really dominated by men, where you have all decision makers kind of look like me, right? they're middle-aged and up, and they're white and they're male, and there's not a whole lot of diversity. But you can have a lot better decision making if you have people there that think differently, that come from different backgrounds. Once you put a metric beside that and you start actually paying attention to it, it becomes something that you're measuring. You have an opportunity to say, okay, this is a KPI. This is something that we can improve, and we're going to set about to improve it. And there's lots of research out there that shows that DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion practices do markedly improve the performance of commercial companies, make better decisions, run more effectively. You have better culture, better communication, better employee retention, all of those things. And when you put a KPI onto it, which ESG will encourage you to do, then you're paying attention to it at all times, whether or not it's something that you consciously think about as part of your past practices. And environmental, right? Paying attention to end of life costs on your products, on your inputs, on your waste streams. In the past, and going back some decades, people paid no attention to anything after it left their manufacturing site or whatever their business is. Now we are seeing more and more attention paid to those actual costs. The chance that those costs will come back and impact that company economically in a very significant negative way, those risks are rising. If you pay attention to what is actually going on after things leave your manufacturing site, you are able to assess those risks. An example would be, this was very famous a couple of years ago, when China started refusing, and the Philippines as well, started refusing to accept huge shipments of trash and sent them back to the US and Canada and said, hey, we're not accepting your toxic trash and your landfill rejects anymore. Ship them back. And suddenly everybody on this side of the Pacific is like, oh, you always accepted it before. If they'd been paying attention, they would have known that there was a risk, that this was inevitable, whether it happened then or a year later, that risk was coming, and there was an opportunity for them to improve their practices to eliminate the risk before it had a sudden cost and a huge negative PR impact for them.
Thank you very much, Keith. And Fabio, I want to come back to you, talking about the EU and what you've seen there. Looking ahead now to 2022, what do you think may change? What do you think may be some trending areas for investors to start taking note of if they're looking to make investments in the impact and social space?
In the EU, the main novelty is the so-called Next Generation EU, which is a huge public program worth 750 billion euro, which, among other things, focuses on the European New Green Deal. So this has opened up a lot of opportunities in the environmental space, in recycling, in, for example, batteries for electric cars or other mobile equipment. Obviously, the generation of electricity by renewable resources. and innovative fields like hydrogen for powering cars or engines in general. So that's the main development driven by public policies. But in general, there is a whole new attention to issues that pertain even to, let's say, traditional investments. For example, investing in a hotel may not be per se impact investing. However, if you set as a target for the hotel that after 5 years, I don't know, 20% of the workforce should be made up of disabled people. For example, you might have down people being waiters, or handicapped people being at the switchboard. That transforms an investment of a traditional type into impact investment. So the area in which you can make a difference doesn't need to be necessarily in clean tech or in I don't know, environmental improvement. It can be anywhere, but you have to pinpoint what are your targets. You have to have, if you're a fund, you need to hire an external advisor who would validate your plans, and then you have to pursue those plans. By the way, there is an issue here. A fund that invests, that takes up only 10% of the capital share of a company might not be in a position to force those changes. So in order to drive the change, in order to make a difference, you need to be either a decision maker within the corporate structure, or to have a strong influence. Otherwise, you might not be in a position to reach the goals that you set at the outset of the investment.
Keith, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big advantage to what we're doing. We're either buying companies outright, or we're buying significant stakes in those companies. It does put us in a position to usher along these kind of cultural and strategic changes within those companies. But I think Fabio touched on something that I think we should pay attention to. There's a danger here of so-called greenwashing, to take a company and make only some changes, or to reframe it as an impact play. We are seeing a lot of that, and there's a lot of criticism going on about that, especially in the LP universe. It can be very tempting to see an opportunity. We've walked away from a few that were really compelling economically, and yet we challenge each other. What's the impact? What is the impact of this play? I love it. We could make so much money with this company, but our whole reputation it rests on our ability to have developed a great investment thesis based on data and based on real world opportunity, and then to apply that in a disciplined way that doesn't ignore opportunity, but keeps the eye on the ball, and to take companies that don't really have measurable impact and try to recast them as impact companies. It can be very tempting in order to make a deal that you think you can get a 10-bagger on. But ultimately, we think that's going to be damaging to the organization. Greenwashing does get washed out. It becomes exposed over time. So we try to look at that. We again take that distinction between ESG and impact, where impact is a company's impact on the world, and ESG is the world's impact on the company. And those kind of internal changes that can happen within a company to make it more sustainable, we really see that as more ESG. And impact is if that company's products and services making a difference in the world that make this world a better place for most of us living here on the planet. I think that's it's an important distinction. It's one that really does get lost. I myself was confused between the two when ESG and impact were first coming in to the investment world. I really saw them as being one and the same thing, but now I see them as being quite distinct and complementary.
Wonderful. Well, gentlemen, as we come to wrap here, what are your big, bold predictions, or maybe one prediction for 2022, and what people need to know to be prepared for what sounds like it's going to be a pretty outstanding year for impact and social? Fabio, let's start with you. And of course, where can everyone find you online to continue the conversation?
They can find me on LinkedIn and on Facebook. Or they can just send me an email at fabio.scacciavillani at gmail.com. So my last name at gmail.com. Where are we going to? Well, at least from my point of view, from my European perspective, impact investment is a niche. It's still very small. There are some public institutions such as the European Investment Fund, which is a EU Commission offshoot, which seed some of these initiatives. There are also national public financial institution in Italy, for example, is the Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, which is essentially the institution which manages the postal service bank. And so they are seeding these new investment funds. In terms of private entities, let's say private money coming into impact investment funds, that's still a rarity. Typically, it's the public institutions, for example, foundation, endowments, that are keener to invest. And we'll see. I mean, it will take some time for the market, the financial market, to acquire the sensibility on these matters.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fabio. Keith, same question to you, and where can everyone find you online to continue the conversation as well?
Sure. Yeah. UpperStage.capital. The name of our company is our URL. You can reach me, Keith, at UpperStage.capital, or follow me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to just keep track of what we're doing. Appearances like this on VCTV and other events that we're taking part in. There's going to be some announcements coming down the pipe here. For example, we just became signatories to the UN's Principles for Responsible Investing, the PRI. So we're very excited about that. We have a lot of initiatives going on around impact and ESG. For 2022, I expect that there's still it's going to be another year of haymaking. Make hay while you can, right? I've talked on this show a number of times, and in other events that I take part in, I am convinced that the next big venture reset is coming when you see the PitchBook article that I republished on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, you see that the average early stage pre-money valuation is $140 million. It's just almost a vertical line how valuations are going in venture right now. I expect that high valuation, high money environment is going to persist for 2022. And that's going to be really exciting for startup companies raising money. There's going to be a lot of great things that get off the ground in this time. I do hope that people will be paying attention to the risks of what will happen when we go into a down cycle. And I think we're going to have a good year after COVID. After COVID finally leaves its seat on the throne of the world, where it currently is. But sometime after that, I do expect there'll be a collapse. But 2022 is going to be amazing. Our eyes are going to be popping out at the valuations we're going to be seeing, and that's why I'm going to continue play where I'm playing outside of the venture landscape, where I can still see great opportunities at very reasonable valuations.
Wonderful. Keith, Fabio, thank you both very much for your thoughts and insights today around impact investments and social responsibility as well. Happy holidays to you both and to our audience as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard, make sure you click like, share, and subscribe on today's episode. Also, if you haven't done so already, please do reach out to Keith and Fabio to connect, to learn more, but also to talk further. Make sure you add context where you heard them, where you met them, and what you would like to continue the conversation about. Until next time, everybody, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. Big thank you to the Token team and to Hasmic for making today's episode possible. Everyone,